Yeah, all right, guys, let's get this going again. We're going to come back with technology. This is always a big topic. If you weren't in the room or just walked in, we already did the drawing. Sorry you were too late. Absolutely, 1 o'clock sharp. Nope, already did it. Snooze, you lose. Okay, yep, that's fine. Let's get started with it. Go ahead.
There we go. Hey guys, I'm Stephen Elkins. I work with Basin Electric Power Cooperative. I am the technology liaison for AUG right now. Just going to introduce Sesh from Valley Creed. They're a gold sponsor and they actually partnered with us for our Horizon upgrade this past year and a half, 2 years. So hand it over to Sesh for the first half hour, and then we'll do we'll have a last hour discussion and a couple topics to discuss. So,
thanks, Chief. There you go. So Steve did the intros. I'm going to go to the. So today we're going to talk about the upgrade that we did at Basin Electric.
Sorry, Sash, can you just get closer to the mic a little bit? So, yeah.
Closer to the mic?
Closer, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, please.
There you go.
Yeah. So we did the upgrade last year, completed it around August or so. So this was going from 80.99.01 to Horizon 145.5.5. And so today, we had some challenges, as soon as they went live with performance and system performance and as such. So we'll be talking about some of those technology learnings from that upgrade as to how we improve the performance. And also the first 30 minutes is what I'll be focusing more on the system performance side. And then Steve will be talking about the interfaces and the API strategies and other things in the next 1 hour. Okay. So as I said, we went from 99.01 to 145.5.5. Some of the benefits of upgrading to Horizon were improved system performance and easier maintenance of some of the interfaces like ICE and flats. And then there's those two are the main benefits from the technology side. So some of the key takeaways. I mean, so as soon as we upgraded, right? Yes. So once they ran the settlement process, that's when they had a big grid performance issue where things started locked out on the grid queue, and the retry counts were increasing, and then there was a lot of blocking happening on the database side, and in the grid logs, they were seeing some deadlocks and things as such. So the way we address that issue is by looking at the database configurations and made some tweaks around the database settings and the SQL Server settings to address that issue. So here is the general environment. It's a SQL Server 2019 Enterprise Edition, about 16 processors, and then about 100 GB RAM. So some of the configuration settings that we worked on were, I have listed them there. And, the first one is the database compatibility level. This is when you upgrade from Ado to Horizon, right, it can be that compatibility level might need to be set to the latest SQL Server version that you are on. That's one thing we did, like we set that compatibility level to the SQL Server 2019 version. And then we set a setting, there is a database setting called parameterization. It was set to first, which would actually cause these additional execution plans to be some suboptimal execution plans to be created. And that would cause, the blocking and the deadlocks and as such. So we changed that setting to simple to make it better. Then we have a couple of other settings. One of them is this max degree of parallelism, which is mainly used, by SQL Server to do the parallel processing of the queries, right? So the max DOP was originally set to 0. That means SQL Server would have used all of the available CPUs to perform the parallel execution of the queries. And that could cause a lot of overhead with the processing. Because if you have too many processors working together at the same time on a single query, that could cause a lot of overhead on the SQL Server side. And so we had to set it to a lower number where the CPUs could, they could process that query more efficiently, and the execution runs pretty quickly, right? So that, and then there is another setting, the cost threshold at the query level. That is another setting we had to adjust. The default value for that is a very low number, like 5 or something. When you install the SQL Server, we had to bump it up to 50. That's because otherwise, all those, even the simple queries would be subject to parallel processing, which could cause the overhead again on the SQL Server side. So we had to make that change as well. So yeah, there were like these 6 or 7 changes that we had to make the SQL Server more efficient as far as the data processing is concerned. And that addressed the grid queue issue with locking and all the blocking that's happening on the SQL Server side. This is we have tried these settings at other customer upgrades as well, when they had these excessive database blocking issues and as such, and these settings really helped them. They gave them a good starting point. So from there, so we could resolve these performance issues, especially on the grid queue side. Okay, there was also another issue on the UI side that that the traders reported. This is mainly on the trade execution screen, where what was happening was that when you retrieve a bunch of trades and then you go from one trade to the other, the system would take a very long time to populate those trade details. You have the trade detail, like the pricing, the fees, and the collaboration tables, and it would take like almost 8 to 10 seconds to populate each of these trade details. So Steven and Tyler and the DVA, Jim, they all did a lot of analysis as to what's going on with these retrievals, and found that the system was spending majority of the time on retrieving tables that have these primary key columns with varchar fields, where what is happening is that there's something called SQL implicit conversion. That's what is happening with converting these values from varchar to unvarchar or integer to varchar and so on. So just to give you an example, here I have a very basic rudimentary like a select statement. This is not the exact statement generated by Horizon, but Horizon generates statements such as these, where you can see that it's doing when it retrieves the trade detail, it needs to retrieve from the position table. And what it is doing is it's passing that numeric value of the position number into that query, which is the numeric value in this example is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that's where the SQL Server was having to do an additional work to convert that numeric value into a varchar field or value. So that's the implicit conversion, or we also call that the data type conversion. And that puts some additional overhead on the SQL Server. And so there'll be some delay in executing that query. Now, you know that in the trade execution screen, you've got almost 10 different trade detail tables, right? I mean, you've got, sorry. Sorry. So yeah, you got like 5 fee tables just to generate the pricing data. And then again, it needs to do 5 more queries to generate this fee data. And then you got like 2 or 3 collaboration tables. So there's like almost 10 different queries running as part of retrieving the trade detail. And especially those fee table retrievals were taking some time. And that was adding up to the overall duration of the retrieval of the trade details. So what would be a better query, right? So if we wrote that same query where you enclose that numeric value with quotes, like single quotes, then SQL Server doesn't need to do that additional work of converting those numeric values into the varchar fields, right? So in this case, that overhead would be avoided, and so your SQL Server would process that query much quicker. So this is not something we can do it, right? I mean, this is a software change that would require. So basically when Stephen and Tyler, when they reported the issue to us, I mean, it struck us that we had seen this issue before with some of the customers, like I believe Energy Transfer, right, Andreas? Yeah. So we saw the issue there. So ION had provided a class event at that point. So we basically put in a ticket into ION, and then they sent a class event to address this particular issue. So basically the remediation there was a class event called DB adapter parameter fix. And this class event would take care of those implicit conversions that take place from time to time. And this could happen throughout the system. It's just that the issue is more prominent in the trade execution screen because it's such a busy screen with lots of trade detail tables. That's where you might see this issue more frequently than the rest of the system. But once we put in the class event, I believe, Steve, I thought you had received the first version of the class event, but that did not resolve the issue entirely. Yeah, because there was some issue with that class event itself, and then we had to report the issue back, and then we received a second version of the class event with improved caching functions within that class event, and that resolved the issue. And with that class event put in place, there was an improvement of about 50% in the retrieval speeds for some of the heavy hitters, right? I mean, with trades that have too many detailed line items, it was taking previously 10 seconds or so. Now it took like half the time. But majority of the trades where you would have only single line items, they should retrieve pretty quickly. I mean, without having any delay. So some of the metrics here I have where, Stephen, if you could explain those trades, like what kind of trades that is, and
These actually weren't very complex trades either. These are ones in 9901 that we're pulling up in 3 or 4 seconds. They usually have, these might have been daily, so they might have 24 positions. We do ours, each hour we separate out as a position. So moving to Horizon originally, like right away when we were hitting 10 seconds, we had basically the whole trading floor was up in an uproar. We were going to have a mutiny, so that this is very top priority.
And with that, I mean, that class event would have helped with the valuation process also, right? I mean, you got all these SQL statements running, and there may be some implicit conversions happening with those queries. So we have some metrics for the valuation performance as well, where we had seen somewhere around like 16–20% improvement on the valuation, the position valuation. The settlements had much bigger improvement. It used to take, yeah,
just to correct you, this is the class one, we didn't see as much improvement here, but these are just from Allegro 8 to Horizon base numbers. And yeah, the way settlement got restructured really cut off for us. Now it does give us time at night, so we have the ability to run 2 if we have a failure, which we honestly haven't seen in Horizon. Allegro 8, we would have 2 or 3 times a week, position or credit would fail. We have to run before the next morning still, which we had a whole process to make sure we could catch an error and rerun the next morning or before the next morning.
So there was another challenge with the upgrade process itself as part of, when we did the upgrade from 8.0 to Horizon. The biggest one is the DB sync process, syncing the valuation detail table, because this table had about 100 million records in it at the time of the conversion or the upgrade. And it took a while, almost 10+ hours or 12 hours or so to do that synchronization process. So we could cut down that duration by taking some of the scripts outside of DB-Sync, running them outside, especially where they're adding the default values on these records and then setting a default value, right? I mean, a new column and setting a default value. We could take them out and run them outside of the DB-Sync to make them run quicker. And then there was specific update statements. Those were taking very long time. That's like one was with some cache NPV factor update statement, and we had to take it out and then run it outside the system. And yeah, well, finally we could cut it down to about 6+ hours or so, that for DB sync performance. And here is another topic I have, which is the database size management. I know we touched on it this morning about this topic. I mean, typically for customers like that have been on using Allegro for about 5–6 years, your database size would grow pretty big with mainly with the valuation detail table size growing. So I mean the most commonly used technique is to do the DB archiving, right? I mean, you record some of the data and then move it to another archiving database, and then you keep it there and keep the production database size smaller. Now, I mean, archiving works well. It has programming afloat and all that, right? I mean, you need some additional development work and then maintain this additional database and but I just want to throw this topic out, float this topic out for discussion. This is SQL Server data compression, a feature that's available as of SQL Server 2016 and above, where you could enable the compression in a given table and then get very good, significant disk space savings just with the compression, right? This is just a SQL Server feature. It takes care of the compression on its own, and and it is transparent to the application as well, right? I mean, the application doesn't need to know that whether a table is compressed or not. It can still retrieve the data, display the data in the front end. So SQL Server does provide some functions to calculate the estimated savings for doing the compression on a given table. So I was looking at one of the tables, this valuation detail table that contained about 65 million records. The table without compression was occupying about 85 or 86 GB of disk space, right? So when we ran this procedure to calculate that estimated savings, it showed that it would come down to 12 GB. That's from 85 GB to 12 GB, right? That's about 70% savings in the disk space. So this is a pretty straightforward function that you could apply. Of course, you would need to shrink the database files after the compression, but I'd like to see if anyone has implemented SQL Server data compression, your production environments, and what your day-to-day.
It works very, very well. It's cheap. It's built in, like Sesh said, and like he said, you recover the space by shrinking the table. So you go to your DBA, you apply the setting, tested it out. The application doesn't know anything about it, so valuation data looks exactly the same. So this is the low-hanging fruit that's very much worth it. And those tables that you see, valuation detail, DB audit, credit exposure, I haven't used correlations or volatilities, but if you have those grow like crazy. Right. Definitely, you ought to do it.
Yep. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, this is one function. I believe it's also being used at Hearttree. Anyone from Hearttree partners? Maybe. Okay. Okay. We were discussing with Keith on this particular compression feature. I think they have enabled it in their production environment, and they've seen a lot of disk space savings, right? And of course, if you use this along with archiving, it gives even more better, significant savings, right? That's how you could maintain the size of the database, and so you don't need to be so aggressive in your archiving policy where you have to really, archive the 3 years or 2 year, any data that's older than 2 years, right? You could be a bit lenient on your archiving and keep the data inside the production environment and still manage the size of the database. I ran some tests with the compression enabled. I made some changes to the data structure and then ran the DB sync and all that. Everything looked good. Unlike partitioning, right? DB sync might have issues with table partitioning versus compression. Compression seems to be giving better, benefits over the partitioning. But of course, it depends on your situation, your environment, and all that. But just want to throw it out and make you aware of this new feature with SQL Server. And this is available from starting 2016 and upwards.
I do have a question around that.
Sure.
Is this a recommended practice by ION, and from the support partners that are in the room, how much of a practice do you currently see with customers from Allegro? Is it something that everyone should be doing?
I can talk about, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is. Well, this is like it's a database function, so it's really not related to Allegro, but it's highly recommended because it'll give you a great benefit. But there's no setting in Allegro to say,
Right.
Go compression the database. It's really just part of the database maintenance.
Okay. Yep, so those are the topics I want to cover today as part of this session. Any questions, any other?
I have another question. So again, Tony from Multigas. We have been running a Horizon for about 5 years. We've upgraded 3 times, and it just seems that every time we've upgraded, we're on 5.5, and every time we seem to upgrade, as much testing as we've done, we always run into hiccups. Unfortunately, I have to say that we tend to break more than we fix when we upgrade, and post upgrade, we log issues, or we log some of the problems with Ion. We troubleshoot. But I'm curious, just to open it up to everyone else, your upgrade strategies and paths. What do you do to minimize issues, whether it be functionality or on the infrastructure side? And it just seems on the infrastructure side, as much as we try to size, add servers, add memory, etc., we always seem to run into problems.
So can you elaborate on the problem?
Yeah, I know on the infrastructure side, we've had to, we've seen unexpected spikes in memory usage or slower performance. Some of the things that we were looking at to get resolved in taking the upgrade haven't, for like mid-office functions and so forth. But again, I'm just curious what people in the room, when they're planning their upgrades, what they do and how they get around and how they manage post-upgrade issues and bugs and defects.
Yeah, this is Jack from Missouri, and can definitely chime in on this one. So unfortunately, you're not alone. Every time we take a upgrade, especially if it's a release, it is very hard not to run into any hiccups afterwards. So the strategy that we like to take is we'll do a big upgrade, like a release upgrade, as least frequent as we possibly can, but we'll try to do bug fix patches, which is a lot less error prone. And now, like you mentioned, as much testing as you can put into it, at the end of the day, you can't really comprehensively test all the complex scenarios, because across business functions, say if you start doing cross-commodity netting in settlements and the reversal goes into a different GL account, I mean, that's very nitty-gritty stuff that each department is not going to have time to test. So what we've done is our group actually has been pretty good with this in the past, where we've had a custom version of a bug patch where they had to go through a process where there was approval and they signed a very important enhancement from a future patch into our version of the patch. Now, it's not super recommended, as I'm told, because obviously it's going to be harder for support to maintain that and support that version of the custom patch. But that is one option we tried in the past, and after running with it a while, it slowly becomes less scalable because you still have to move off into a most recent bug patch, and so but at least patch you over for a while.
2 hours of implementation.
Okay. Awesome.
I would say also when you're taking an upgrade right now, I don't know if anybody's entering into version 22, which they also changed a bit to .NET 6, .NET Core. Just take a step at a time. At Energy Transfer, we're doing some other changes in our infrastructure. We're also going to SQL Server 2022. we already saw that in that version, the execution plans just change. And we're now tuning database and plus the .NET Core. We saw memory specs. So we have so many moving parts now that I would say recommend that leave your hardware like it is where you're running right now. Do the Horizon upgrade, test it there, and then kind of stagger in other changes, not try to do everything in one shot. So you can cover as you go.
Let's keep in mind, guys, tomorrow we have an implementation session. Like the entire day tomorrow is implementation. So let's just kind of keep that in mind. I know there's a gray area between technology and implementation, but just kind of keeping that in mind.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question.
We have started thinking about going from 5.2 to 5.7 possibly next year. And you brought a good point because we were struggling to figure out what would be a good way to go. We wanted to eliminate as many hassles as we can, but we have no clue what we are stepping into. When we moved from Allegro 8 to Horizon, it was a very bumpy move. It took a lot of time, and because of certain discoveries that were not done properly, and then customizations and things like that, and we don't have too many customizations. So should we jump from, and it's a good point that we should not do everything together, because we were thinking about growing from 2017 to 2022 and then, bumping up the OS and all. Is there anything else we should keep in mind? Should we go from 5.2 to 5.5, let it run for some time and then jump to 5.7, or should we just jump from?
Great questions for tomorrow. Yeah.
All right.
We have a very fun presentation tomorrow.
Let's park it.
I just had a question related to your upgrade. How many users we're talking about on your side?
58, 60. Yeah, in our production system, I think just shy of 60.
Concurrent users.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, typically, we probably don't see more than 40 at a time, in all honesty, but we have 57 concurrent.
So 57 concurrent users, 100 gigs of memory, 16 CPUs. Is that on a physical VM?
Well, we're VMs. We're close to being.
Okay.
Well, we're in our own cluster, but yeah, we're in VMs.
I guess my question was back based on the last screenshot that I saw. I may have missed one page, but it looks like you may have partitioned the evaluation detail table by using table partitioning. Being that disk space is so cheap these days, I'm just wondering, by using SQL compression, do you find that there's a little bit of latency now?
We actually, I'm fairly certain we don't have compression turned on, and we were looking at partitioning, but I think we were under the impression that when you DB synced, it wiped your partitioning out or tried to undo it. So we were playing with it, but we haven't gotten that far. Our DBA definitely wants to. He's probably on the phone right now screaming at me, but he just can't talk.
No, I'm just saying with 65 million records, this isn't pushed into production, correct?
Yes, that is production.
That's production, that's enabled in production.
Compression hasn't been enabled.
No, we haven't enabled compression. This was Valley Creek telling us we should do it. We actually archive right now.
Correct.
I can get to, I think I have one here.
No, I was just wondering if you were testing that theory in dev, do you find or do you see any latency when you're going down into historical data that's been compressed, or when you're dealing with 80 million records, how heavy are those indexes now once it's compressed? It's fairly new feature in SQL, so.
Use the mic, Sash.
Thank you. So in our testing, I haven't seen any latency or any delays in the queries, but I know that Hartree has been running or enabled compression for about 2 years now, and maybe energy transfer also for some time, maybe a year or so. So if there were any performance issues, they would have surfaced by now.
Correct. So we're compressing on the network side where we're sending the smaller packets around. So I guess maybe our research as well, being that we are
we have a very heavy database with other manufacturers. It's just a manufacturing machine of data. Maybe it's something that we can venture into in a better conversation, because we are piloting 2019 OS in dev, and we already have that released into production, but we're testing 2019 SQL Server in our dev environment now, and we haven't seen spikes like this where we installed 2019 SQL Server, we reattached the 2016 databases, but we didn't do the upgrade. The compatibility level was left alone. So from a backwards compatible standpoint, I hear people talking about 2022. If they're going from 2016 to SQL Server 2019 to 2022, I would think in their dev environment, they should be doing two types of tests. One with the compatibility level turned up and one without, just to see. And also, if they're working well in 2016, they should take the server configuration objects and look at that on what you have configured in 2016 and look at what you have configured in 2019 and try to find that hybrid of both worlds. Is that what you guys are doing with them at Hartree? Because they have a lot of users compared to our environment. So I think the last thing I heard was they had about 19 or 20 app servers. So being that you have 20 app servers running on a 16 CPU environment. Okay, so that's my question about latency. Do you see any of that, any negativity?
All right.
So yeah, I have always said
I'm going to kick you off the stage, Sesh.
So I have always seen the compatibility level set to the highest level that is available in the SQL Server. I did not try with the lower level compatibility level on that particular test. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can say when Andres was talking about us doing everything all at once, that's one of the things is going to SQL 2022. And our developer, we actually found that Microsoft recommends you set the compatibility level to where you're coming from because your plans change. So we are doing exactly that testing. What do we do when it's set one way versus the other? So that's the complexity of you got to do all these knobs and switches and wheels you got to churn because you're tuning and retuning everything that you change. So if you change the database, you got to retune that. If you change your app servers, we're going to .NET 6, everything's changing. So we're going, whoa, what did we get ourselves into? So try to minimize the amount of change you introduce if it's not necessary.
Yeah, we typically try to do our hardware and the application upgrades separately. So when we went to Horizon, we stayed with our same and moved up. We might have done 2019, but as minimal as we can do, and then we'll do a server refresh somewhere between our next upgrade and this, and we'll roll different servers out. Yeah. On that topic, it came up earlier, but how many people use a read-only replica for Horizon? One of the big things we did was it's a near live read-only replica. It's the SQL Server function. I'm going to go to my note. It's there's scale out availability groups. We don't do any failover clustering with it, but anything that is not Horizon's application is the only thing that touches production. And I say it's near real time. It's like seconds. So you can make a change in Horizon. It flows over that replica, and then reporting, user queries, anything like that. It made a huge difference in our performance. And this is pre-Horizon, but that was a big problem with us. So.
Yeah, and I think with the replication too, when you're when we upgraded, we just wiped our replicated server or replicated database, and then re-replicated to the new location, and then we didn't have to change any configs in Power BI in any of the Excel stuff. So just makes the whole configs and all the reporting like a non-issue.
Yeah, it does. And then I guess the other one that I was talking about with somebody was T-1 systems. You guys, how many people are we all using those? Do you guys? It's probably one of the, as an IT person, it's probably one of the best troubleshooting things that we have. I think we actually have two. We have a risk and we have our IT section one that. It's because we get live up-to-date data. We don't have to mess around and prod. And then our DBA actually, we have it set up so you can pause the T-1s from, we added a setting in Horizon. So a user, like for instance, our risk group can go in there, freeze their copy from within Horizon, change a value, and then their copy will stay until they change it back. So it rotates every morning at 7 a.m., I believe. Their post-valuation, so they have last night's valuations already run. That's another one once we did. That was part of our, it was a pre-Horizon, but yeah,
it's been a really big deal for us in our middle office for, marked markets, for credit, being able to put in test trades, things like that, that you're not going to mess with your system, but it's literally the latest to date information because it's last night's run.
Yep.
And so we have our own environment that we don't let others in. And I mean, truthfully, and again, now, like Stephen said, they have created one for IT to use now as well and test in, because they were using the environment at one point, but then we don't know when they're in there and what they've changed if we're trying to troubleshoot something. So it gives us that environment, especially if we're troubleshooting for credit or marked markets.
Yep, and it's a single app server, so it's not built to run valuations and things like full-on all-time valuations and stuff on there. And it's literally only used by maybe a handful of people. And then we have, like I said, our production system is 6 app servers, database server, and the replica. Our QA is an exact copy of prod. Same thing with the replica. And then we have a test, which is a neutered down version, and then our T-1 systems, which we do. That's what we do. We now in that T-1, we do our development in there now. NIST, it's just easier, and troubleshooting with that live data is a lot easier. I think there's a couple more just. Yeah, and this was another thing in Horizon. These indexes, they were causing us a ton of issues, and going back and forth with Ion Rep, they basically said you can wipe them out and rebuild them. They're rebuilding. It was causing our it was 6 hours of maintenance jobs overnight, our SQL Server stuff. Wiping these out before that and rebuilding them knocked it down to 2 hours. It just something in those indexes was really causing problems because with these maintenance jobs, it runs into our, like I said, our T-1 setup. All that's on SQL Server. So if these things run late, it kills our T-1 for the next day. And yeah, data archiving. So this is our current plan right now. Like I said, we haven't dealt with compression much. We haven't tested it much. We didn't, with the upgrade, we didn't jump to it. That's kind of a post-upgrade thing we're going to start looking into. But DB audit, we do clean DB audit up. Anything that's system generated or service account generated, so like interfaces and things, we wipe those out. User changes, we don't touch. So like I said, 90 days, like user generator kept forever. Evaluation detail, we keep 14 days of evaluations, and we only keep last day of month after that. After 18 months, we move it to a separate database, we archive it off. I've never been asked to go grab one of those, so I don't know why we keep it, but it's there. Yeah, it's there, that's what we decided on, but instituting all that, like I said, before I started on the ETRM team, we were at 200 million rows. They weren't doing anything, and we knocked that down to 76 by doing this stuff. And like the way the compression looks, we're going to knock it down this size-wise even more. But like I said, it's still to be tested. We'll have to run it through, make sure we're still in our parameters with retrieves and everything. Yeah, we archive weekly. We run it on Sunday mornings or Saturday mornings when it's pretty quiet. About 4.5 million records a week. And then we actually SQL cleanup. We wipe those tables out every day. Credit exposure, the Power Financial, the FERC valuations, and fin detail. We do clean those up every day. I think credit exposure we actually wipe out completely. because it gets rebuilt. No, I say we have a purge process because we get a lot of orphaned records with a non-confirmed records. We wipe those out every night, every quarter. We wipe everything older than 90 days out.
Does that come from the settlement run? Is that why the settlement valuation runs creates these records?
Yeah, they're basically, there'll be records that if one as recently as, it's the unconfirmed records that there was an adjustment and that shouldn't be confirmed. It's not the correct one, but it'll sit out there as a unconfirmed record for all time. So we just purge those off. We just started that this year. They were out there. I actually don't have the number for what we did the first time we ran it, but right now quarterly we send a list of those to settlements so they can just double check that we're not wiping anything out we shouldn't. Yeah, this is we interface. We have a couple different ways we interface. We run Informatica and FME. PCI does the interface in PCI. PCI does the lifting. It does the pushes and retrieves from its end. So we don't do anything from within Horizon to it. OD, we have a custom class event interface. Tyler is over there is the OD expert. That was built on implementation, and we've kind of just been maintaining it since. We made changes here and there, but we only interface to a single server. So we have a designated interface server. It just kind of kept it cleaner. The only thing is now that we have enough interfacing that we're running into each other on stuff. So we're debating on, we've been testing in QA about with a net scaler and bouncing it between the three. It seems to be working fine. We didn't think we'd have too many issues, but that's currently in the works. And then we do, our last server in the chain is the ICE server, which going to Horizon, I know Tiffany will tell me different, but from a purely administrative standpoint, it's night and day different. It's far better than we were used to. We just have configuration issues with trades coming in. I think we understand where we're at now, but all the new derivative parameters and everything, we weren't ready for all that. And we don't, sorry? Oh. No, okay.
So Stephen, going back to your last slide, just to kind of.
Last one?
Yeah, we have an online question.
Sure.
I know the answer for it for our group, but maybe somebody else in here has some thought to it.
Sure.
So it says, with the frequent archiving, how are your SOX audits accomplished? Do you have to refer to the audit database in those cases versus using the application front end for any evidence requests? Basin is not subject to SOX requirements.
Yep.
So for us, it's not an issue.
Not an issue. Yes.
I just got asked, do other companies purge records for unconfirmed transactions? Lots of head nods of yes.
That seems like a pretty common practice. Yeah.
Okay, lots of head nods of yes.
Does anybody have the response to the SOC question from anybody else? I mean, for us, it's like I said, it's a non-issue.
I wanted to come back to, I guess, something that you mentioned before. We manage our indexes. That dropping of the index bothers me, that you have to drop an index and you have to reapply that index. Because as the table gets bigger, what can happen is you can actually drop that index, recreate that index, and you could also lose some data over time. God forbid, and the index got corrupted or something like that. You can lose data. Yep. Why not manage it with a script where you're looking at the database and looking for fragmentation over a certain percent, and then just re-index that via script using the maintenance. I do every day, and every night when that reorg goes off, I know that at 6 o'clock in the morning when we start up our day, our indexes are balanced and we are ready to start the day and hammer that server.
That I don't know. Very well, Jim could have been doing it, our DBA. I don't know. This is just yeah. I don't think we've noticed any data loss, but yeah, it's possible. Sure.
Oh, 1 second. 1 second.
Hold on.
Dahlia with Marathon Oil. Question on the deleting of records, on the unconfirmed records. From what I understand, it's a common practice for those companies that do have SOX controls. How are you managing that? Or does no one else have SOX controls related to settlement records being deleted? Unconfirmed?
Yeah.
Come again?
Hold on, wait a second. Wait a second. I got you.
Still a record in the system though.
Right, but if they're valid, they'll be recreated. If they're not valid, then they're gone, and they won't flow to your financials.
Okay, so that would be the control. Okay.
Well, the system's going to delete and recreate them every day anyway. That's the way Allegro works. So those unconfirmed records, I was worked for a SOX company that never came up, but I think that the explanation would be the systems regenerate this every day. And like you said, it's going to orphan them when you do PPAs.
Yep.
They'll sit there, but they don't correspond to any financial that you've ever submitted, no invoice. So I don't see why that it would be a problem. You just got to be able to explain that.
So I'm Kim Janecki with an L, and I understand what you're saying, and I've worked for companies before where at the end of the month, we have a SOX control where we have to prove to the auditors that we have confirmed and invoiced every single record that exists or would exist in Allegro. So the right answer for us at those companies would have been for us to go back and eliminate the situation that was pushing that record through. If it's an invalid record, that's usually related to something where, we had something come through in a previous day valuation, that trade has since been voided, it doesn't get removed from settlement validation. We can easily see those because the creation date is later than our current valuation run. But if it's something that's going to come back the next time we run valuation, and it might not always, it depends on how far back your valuation mode actually values. We are supposed to deal with that. We're supposed to deal with that by getting, having an adjustment to a trade or something that's actually pushing through that invalid record.
Anybody else? No?
That's a good scenario there, but sometimes the system will generate records because of some customization you have to do. In our case, we have some special fees because it doesn't, like on the trade, you can't handle from the pricing side like under delivery or this type of trade. So we just hook it in as an over under position, and it will always generate that price record, the zero price, only when settlement validation. And it's a valid trade. It's just that you're not hitting the over or the under, but the accountants don't confirm it because they know, this is the trade, we went over, and it still generates that under record. You could maybe tweak it to not generate it through some hook in the valuation itself, but for us, it's a daily matter, and they just don't confirm those.
Yeah.
The people online.
If it's zero value, I would say that's a non-issue. We did not have that at the company where we had that control, but I would say delete away. But yes, anything else, we would not have. I assume your company has the same, not every company has the same accounting standards or requirements, and that's what we would have to deal with. We would have to not have that situation where it was bringing through records that we knew would be invalid and that we could just not confirm them.
Not sure if I have. Oop. That was the end of it.
Just a comment on that came from online. It says they've built queries to show orphan records in settlements, and then accounting group reviews them and cleans them up, and that's their SOX review. So it seems to be pretty common, even with SOX.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Nick. Does somebody else have the mic? Michael from Energy. I just thought that slide that you had was, I know, kind of funny that you showed the improvements of your valuation times and the credit valuation had a 0% improvement.
Yeah.
So like, what was like some of the conversation, like the why behind that? Because like, you know, I just stopped running that valuation because it actually seemed like it took even longer in Horizon.
Well, we don't know. I guess I don't know why we didn't see an improvement. But for us, at least, the overnight stuff, I mean, I don't think we run credit in the morning or during the day.
Yeah, our credit's overnight. One of the big things with the credit that we noticed is it front-loaded a lot of the calculations. So where, you know, there's some post-credit runs like the exposure, the forward, the margining. It front-loaded all of that to be a part of the credit valuation itself. So the credit valuation takes longer, but all of those post-credits take way less time than they used to.
That post-final it used to be probably half, like credit would take an hour and the other part would take an hour. Now that thing is 5 minutes, but the actual credit valuation is stretches. So I guess technically credit got longer if you're looking at just that credit portion.
I just want to say something about the fin detail dilution that young lady in the middle was mentioning. I work with Allegro probably when we first went live, and for the first year, I couldn't stop our users from creating a settlement valuation and span across I guess a large date range. They manufacture records like it's going out of style, and so I got to a point where the table was about 4 million plus in fin detail, and Allegro said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I have no idea. It's your system." They gave us a cleanup script and encouraged us to say fin detail's not meant the whole 4 million records, you know, within this period of time. You're only live 6 months. How did we get there? So for us, we do a monthly cleanup, and we comfortably clean up the fin detail record because we don't have control over some of the settlement valuations that, you know, we have control over the physical and financial valuations that run, but sometimes if a user has access to the system and they inadvertently run a settlement valuation with the wrong parameters, it can create those records and you wouldn't even know. So when users during the day are making a statement that the system seems a little slow today, you wouldn't even know that it's manufacturing all day 100,000 records of information. So that's my experience, and I'm comfortable with cleansing and keeping it as lean as possible, because I think that in Allegro, when it gets to about 128 gigabytes of size, just gets a little wonky for me.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with a 60 gig to 85 gig database. Once I get to 100, I get a little antsy because I know things are down the pipe. Just wanted to mention that.
Just on the comment you were making about users running settlement valuations in particular and not realizing that they are filling up fin detail. And this goes for just generally in terms of users running ad hoc valuations in the system and trying to not lock it down so much that they can't do it. We actually wrote a small class event for one client where we had this problem continually where we tell them, hey, cull your valuation down, only run settlements for the one counterparty or the one trade or the 1 month that you need to, and continually we would have those, the usual suspects that would just run it wide open, and we gave them a class event to tell them about how many grid rows they were about to create. So they realized, oh my gosh, I'm about to create 20,000 grid rows. I forgot to put my filters on. So that's a good trick to keep your users from doing that.
We actually had sort of the same problem. Right when we went to Horizon, we have a set of people in middle office who would select all trades for all time on trade execution, and then they would go, oh dang it, and hit cancel, but that doesn't stop it. So we had to write a class event that if that happens, it goes, are you sure? Like it pops up. Are you sure?
That's good.
I'll add one thing to that, because under her conversation and yours both, we had users who would go, let me submit my settlement. Oh, it hasn't finished yet. Let me submit my settlement again. It hasn't finished yet. Let me submit my settlement again. And we were getting locked because they were submitting the same thing over and over again. So we have a class event
that we have also the Big Brother table. Every time they make a request for a settlement, it writes to a table where we have all their criteria and parameters, and if they submit the same thing again within 5 minutes, a message box pops up and tells them, you can't do this. Because we got tired of all the locks, because they would have backed up in the grid all the same valuation running over and over. With the exact same parameters.
We just yell at our settlement team enough so they don't do it.
We as well experienced a trade execution cancel. So what we did was we put a class event in front of, on the UI side, that we allowed them to do 30 days, and if they want to do more than 30 days, we pre-warn them, I believe, is what we're doing. What happens when they hit cancel? Does your app server explode when we set it?
No, we're past that, but it does runs very slow.
Okay, my app server will spike, and then it'll eventually spawn up another thread and recapture and continue.
You know, we did have an issue, I don't remember how we solved this off the top of my head, but we did have an issue sort of like that where our Horizon app servers weren't releasing the memory. Like you just leave it on. So yeah, I mean, we do recycle twice a day, 6 a.m., 6 p.m. And that and it actually times out fairly well with our ICE connection, because that's the time the ICE recycles there, so we reconnect right away.
Yeah, on the trade execution or any view, right, where you specify all time periods and then do a retrieve, there is a criteria warning checkbox in visual model for each view. You can check the box and then the system will do that, that will provide the criteria warning. Like if you selected all time periods and do the retrieve, it will give you the warning message. So just want to let you know.
Yeah, that's built in.
This is open forum time now, so if you have any questions for the group. Yep, implementation is tomorrow.
Can you give me more details how you actually do the archiving? Plus, our top three tables are like the valuation detail, fin detail, and fin transaction detail. In 9131, we used to have a class event that we could use to archive valuation detail, which we lost. So can you give me more detail how
we don't do
archiving?
We don't do it in a class event. We actually do it with SQL Server scripts, I believe. You got your, oh no, we do have the class events that right. We hand wrote them.
So you're asking about the archival, correct? Yes. So the purging we do through a SQL script. The archival is through class events. I believe we found a copy on the knowledge base that we modified.
You're right. That's what it's from.
So the process that it goes through is it identifies the rows to archive, and it then goes through a batch process to do it in batches, and copies it over to the archive, and then deletes out what it's copied.
Yeah.
This is Steve from Northfield. We do something similar to SQL scripts. We create a transaction, and we'll move the valuation data. We'll hold a 12-day running. We'll move the data. We'll delete the data, and we'll commit. We do that daily, 3 a.m. One valuation run for us can be a million records. So if we waited for the end of the week and had performed that action on a Sunday night or a Saturday night, it just screws up the indexes in that table. So we elect to do it daily through SQL, and then what we do is we bring the archive data to the screen to show the user, hey, the archive database, they have the control to bring that back at any point into production or leave it where it needs to be left. I too hold a 12-day archive in credit. I've never been asked to restore, even official valuations or any type of exchange-related valuations. I've never had to bring back from restore unless we're doing analysis like on what happened a year ago at the last day of the month, or go back because of a question, and that's very seldom.
I believe it's like some of that we actually do in TM1, correct? Yeah, they pull some of that data off and put it into a data cube, and then they do that in TM1, but that's outside of us I don't know how much they do with it, but
I have no idea. All I know is the data's there if we want it, and as risk people, we want it. I'm just going to say that.
Jonathan from Promean. When it comes to archiving, we archive all the same tables y'all are talking about, but also we archive prices to a certain point. However, and I know you can bring them back, with that archive function in Allegro and UI. Does anyone else have any issue actually using the prices if you bring them back? Like we have a whole bunch of provisional pricing setups that go back even into the prior year where we're keeping track of we're keeping track of the difference between a current price and an original price as that deal is still settling out over time. And I found that I had to quit archiving some of those prices because I couldn't get the valuation to work correctly, referencing the returned archived prices, if that makes sense.
This is the internal Horizon.
Yes.
Archive? Okay. Yeah. No, we haven't used that. So.
Oh boy. All right.
Nope, we don't use it.
Check your price status flag. Make sure your price status flag is not estimated, and make sure your price status flag is not set to estimated when it comes back. Because if it's estimated, it won't show up.
Thank you. I promise this is the last one.
Yeah.
When it went into archive. Oh, if it was set as estimated when it went into your archive, it's probably coming back as estimated. But you should ask Tom that was here because he's smarter than me. But that would be my guess. But or Dawson or somebody smarter than me, but that's my initial guess.
I have a quick one, and shifting away from archiving a little bit. So we moved to 5.2, I think about 2 years back, 2020. And what we have been noticing is sometimes the thread pool in our system just floods. Some days there will be thousands of threads in that thread pool. And slowly, if we do not bounce our app pool, it brings down the server, it brings down the system. So we started bouncing our app pool every night. But we have not been able to identify why the thread pool has been flooding. And it doesn't happen every day. It just happened probably once in, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Rest of the days, it's absolutely clear. And if anyone else is experiencing that, if anyone has solved this problem, I would be happy to hear that.
We're one version higher than you on 5.3.
Okay.
And we were told by Allegro to recycle your app pools twice a day, once at 6, once at 6 at night, and once at 6 in the morning, some with the heart tree. And I think that's the reason behind it, because you can have 0 users in the system and just do a SQL trace, and you'll see that there's 300,000 hits a minute.
Yeah.
And so with that, IIS may not be, depending on what version, how your IIS is configured, there are also enhancements that you can do within IIS to sort of bring down and set certain criteria within the configurations to help with that. But I've noticed that the 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. recyclers kind of drop the IIS service or the WP and reinitialize it with a clean slate. So you try to do that every day, and then you also try to optimize, I guess is the word to use, your IIS configurations. And so I went through that whole gamut, and we were in that same scenario, and we worked with our vendor, and we were able to not only optimize IIS across the board, but we were also able to implement the compression that works along with IIS to get the smallest amount of footprint as possible. Because with COVID, all our workers went to a VPN instead of in the office.
Yeah.
So we had to scramble to convert everything from paper to digital. And these are one of the things that came up in 2020 is how do we create the least, the smallest footprint possible utilizing a VPN. So twofold. One would be, I would start 7 days a week, 6 a.m., 6 p.m., or whenever your off hours are.
Yeah.
And any third-party connection objects that you do have, if it's Trade Connect or what have you, if you are using Trade Connect, the ICE will tell you as well. They would want you to recycle at 4:30 in the morning and redo a handshake there. And the same thing with CME. One thing that the CME tells me is, you tell Allegro to stop connecting on Saturdays to us. We're going to bounce you. So now, every Sunday, I get an error at 6 o'clock saying, you know, the transport disconnects. So CME does drop us on Sundays.
Yeah.
We have a hard time of reestablishing. So I would definitely advise that.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, we've recycled since we were in 9901, but that was actually to fix a caching problem that would fail our valuations. And
Yeah.
we just continued it as it, like I said, we ran it with, when we first started, we didn't, and then we saw issues and we just went back to recycling.
Yeah.
It kind of solves our issue. And we stagger ours. So they recycle 3 minutes apart and still they'll be back up. So usually if somebody's on that doesn't boot them out, they'll just get bumped to a different server.
Yeah, yeah. No, good suggestions. Thank you. I think it relates to just Allegro or Horizon not releasing memory properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, this is a suggestion that not everybody's going to think this is a good idea, but for me, this would be a great idea, is if you could cycle the IIS from the app without requiring server access for that user. So like, yeah, the timed IIS restarts, all that's great, but like our maintenance window's on Thursday night and we came in on Friday morning and like nobody saw that everything was backed up, right? So, you know, we're doing our scramble on Friday morning and then I ran a job and tried to process way too much and locked up the app again, which is like the first time I've ever done that. And so then we sat there for 2 more hours, like with our IT group saying like, oh, what went wrong? You know, like, let's call our consultants, all that stuff. It's like, no, let's just try and restart the IIS and not let me overload it this time, which, you know, I mean, it's just 2 hours, but it's 2 hours on a Friday, you know?
Yeah, and I know.
And if I could just hit a button.
I know it doesn't help from the user perspective, but I have a script that will knock a server down, or my maintenance script will knock them all down, so I don't got to actually log into them all.
Yeah,
that's actually a technical concern. No, sorry, I was saying that's actually a technical concern and a security concern as well. So we generally don't like the users being able to access the server in that regard.
Yeah, I would have a hard time giving my users ability to.
That was a hard deny from the techno team. But I wanted to make a comment earlier regarding the archival process. So we actually realized I don't know if anyone else used the Allegro Price Connect module. Wherever those log files for the Exchange Connect, which I think the data table is a PC vendor data response, reaches a certain number of rows, then it will start creating deadlocks. So it's not that the prices are deadlocking each other, it's because it was trying to write to the log file of the pricing data that it starts deadlocking the prices from coming in. So we actually also frequently purge and archive the log files, the PC vendor data response.
Yeah, we actually do clean our log files up too. We hadn't noticed that, but we do that because we were taking up so much space. We were getting to be
right.
Well, we had a couple that were getting to be a gig a piece, but yeah, we do purge those out as well.
Yeah. So also a question to kind of shift gears a little bit. What do you guys use as a standard to gauge when you need to expand the number of app servers or grid servers? I don't know what metrics everyone else uses to say, hey, we're at a place where we might need to add some more app servers or grid servers into our self-hosted, our own servers.
Well, we did have pre-Horizon, so moving from 901 to Horizon, we saw a shift. We have as many app servers as we do is because in pre-Horizon, all the processing seemed to be done on the app server. So we would peg our app server all the time. So that's where we started adding because we had so much use. But now that we're on Horizon, we don't see near as much use per server, but we're pegging the database. Same amount of user on each side. So all that processing is now done on the database side, which is totally fine with us. I mean, we were having a ton of server issues because of that, but.
Same here. We use a product called Logic Monitor, and we use, each app server we have is, I think, 4 CPUs and 32 gigs, and we monitor the usage, and we get notified whenever the app servers are higher than 70%, which is not often, except if somebody goes into the trade execution and does a select all or try to, and it cancels. But I guess my question, or what I want to say back to Nick, is I have a script too that can recycle the app servers and C# a class event. You know, I have it written for a user on a legacy app somewhere else that she needs to recycle, hit the button and go. She's the administrator. I too would advise in Allegro for someone to run wild with that button, but you can create a two-click button, run C# code to recycle as long as you know what the app server name is.
Yeah, you could drop that.
Yeah, you can get there, no problem. We could talk about it later.
Yeah, just so you know where I'm coming from, I used to have app server access, and so when I mess up the app, I could go restart it. I don't have that anymore. And so, and all I want to do is reset IIS.
Yeah, I actually have access. That I run off. That's what we use for our downtimes and stuff.
Stick it on your trade floor, and when it gets to a certain decibels of the users yelling that it's slow, then you just add app servers. That's the old school way. I thought I'd mention that's really cheap.
So I got a question online. Has anyone seen that after a scheduled app pool recycle during off-peak hours cause the system to sleep until a user moves in? This prevents scheduled processes from running.
I believe I saw this on the forum. Somebody asked the same question on the forum, I believe, a couple weeks ago.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So somebody,
No, I did answer the question, and the question online is my manager asking the same.
No, we haven't seen that, but you guys are hosted, correct?
So what's the question?
You guys are hosted, correct, if I remember?
Ion Cloud, where is Ion Cloud?
Yeah, Ion Cloud. We haven't seen that. But like I said, we're virtuals, we're on site. I don't know, has anybody else in Ion Cloud? You guys? Sasha's got a.
Oh, over there. Making me work.
Yeah, if you have the Allegro helper service running on your app server, it will be pinging the app server every 20 seconds or so. So your app server should not go to, should not go sleep, after we recycle. Oh, okay.
I wanted to go back to the question on app servers. So we've got Horizon 5.3 on Azure, and we have scale set enabled. So we're able to have our app server start up according to like demand. So we have a couple of different ways we're doing that, and that seems to be working out well for us.
So do you know, so what's the highest, so scale server, it'll add servers as needed, right? So what's the range that you've seen from the min to the max, if you can give a kind of a number or give us an idea of how scaled up it's become?
For our case, it's only been, I think I've only seen like a max of like 6 or 7 app servers for front and back end.
Thank you.
A quick follow-up to that. So I know Allegro does kind of the load balancing by itself, but it's really surface level in that it just takes one, places it on one, and it just splits it across the board, right? Has anyone ever written class events to gauge what the actual cost of things running on the server are and try to split the load evenly across? For example, like if grid 1 is taking a heavy load right now, it has 5 items, grid 2 has 5 items as well, but it's very quick 5 items. So is there any class events or optimization that anyone has done in the past to truly balance server load?
No, kind of to piggyback on that, does anybody at night run a class event or something to adjust servers to have, so like you have user servers during the day and then bump those to background servers for the evening runs?
Sort of. We actually readjust some of the app servers to grid servers to kind of help with valuation runs overnight and then flip it back.
When you guys did that, did you guys see like a marketable improvement when you, maybe?
It's overnight, but the processes do fail less. So in that regard, it's a little smoother, but we don't see a time metric.
Yeah, we kind of discussed that, or have discussed it on the IT side, just because all of our servers right now, all of our servers are user servers, and they all do grid service jobs. So they're like, during the day, if somebody runs something, I mean, it spreads it across. So you could be in there and you run a full valuation and you're going to get some of that. So we discussed kind of bumping those around just so we don't have that, but.
It does help.
Okay.
It does help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely split user servers and separate them from background. So that's the policy at Energy Transfer and other places I've been. We don't have servers do both.
Okay. Yeah.
One sec.
You were talking already, so you can be saying. Thank you, sir. You're very kind. I want you to host next year. I guess what I was saying is we have 4 user servers, actually 4 app servers. 2 are just slotted, 16 slots each. One of the things I would concern myself with playing with that background slot is your database server. So if you have 4 or 8 servers banging on the database now, you can, again, paging and latching and deadlocks, that all comes because you're knocking on the door and you have 4 servers, 6 servers banging on that door.
Yeah, we actually, because on that same topic, the help actually discusses, background slots based on the server, and talking with Value Creed, it's more based on the database server, not your app server, of course. It's like, especially 1.5. Your total BG slots should be 1.5. How many cores you have on your SQL server? Which we're way above that, and we see deadlocking. So
Yeah, the total BG slots recommendation was that it should be 1.5 times to 2 times the number of CPUs on the database server. So if you had if you have a SQL server with 16 CPUs, then you could have a total BG slots of about 24 to 32. I mean, if your SQL server is able to handle that kind of load, and if it is still looking at like 50% or 70% CPU, then you could add more, BG slots, either, add more app servers or increase the number of BG slots on the app servers.
yeah, that's kind of our next project, is to get that squared away and get some testing to make sure we're not getting any slower with that. And then the separating servers with BG slots, that's the other thing that's on our plate right now.
Right. In your case, what you have is a 16-core SQL server.
Yep.
And then the total number of BG slots is 42, because there are 7 app servers each with 6 BG slots.
Originally when they installed it, when we set up 901, it was cores on your app server. So the guys who set it up were like N1, so 7 cores, 7 BG slots on every server. And that's just how it's been for 8 years.
Right. I mean, that's the reason why, when you run evaluation, in your case, the database is hitting 100% CPU, is what we noticed. But your evaluations only overnight, not during the day. So
I've heard the same thing that you're saying. Depends on how many cores are in the system. That I've also sat with Tom from France, who's here today. Don't want to speak for him, but he also mentioned you'll find the sweet spot. If you test it, if you think that you'll run well with 12 and you're running a 6-core CPU, run it, test it, benchmark it, and see what happens. So we were always at 8. We'll stay at 8 threads. 7 is what we were recommended. We've been running 16 threads for about 1.5 to 2 years live. No deadlocks. It really takes. You need to take the time to configure your database server correctly. You need to take the time to make sure your best efforts in IIS is configured properly. You can't just install it and say we're done.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
So we did that on ours because we were having performance on our nightly evaluation, and we kept trying to we had some additional servers which we could spin up at night, Azure, and then we'd bring them back down. We started trying to play with those, bring them up, add additional BG slots. We went from 96 to 120. And at 120, we seemed to then get degradation on the SQL side. It was too much, so we had to back it back down to 96. We found some other improvements and ended up getting our evaluation time cut in half. But yeah, you got to find that sweet spot.
Yeah,
I'll just add to that. I'll say I'm very surprised that we're talking about performance and nothing about natural gas scheduling is being said. Because for us, that's, well, yeah, just from a performance issue perspective, that's where it starts. I'm hearing, okay, we select from trade execution. That usually doesn't give us any issues unless it starts from the scheduling side and now it affects trade execution. But trade execution by itself doesn't give us any issues at all. But the other thing is what we've been told is that Allegro does user balancing and not load balancing. So on the user side, if we have, 5 schedulers on one machine and, 5 traders on, or 1 server and 5 traders on the other side, the traders are fine because their side is fine. And the schedulers are jammed because their load is, and we're like, why can't you just kind of balance the load rather than the users? Because some users are lightweight and others are heavyweight, but it doesn't care. It just, so.
Sorry, Jack from the city. One last question around the evaluations. Has anyone tried to tweak with the valuation parameters to say one row of valuation only values X number of positions? Because by default, each line has a lot, right? And then it could get stuck. I see a bunch of hands go up over there.
We had a class event created for us that'll take those positions, and I mean, you get a string of position numbers, like 100 of them, and we would group them. We would also delete if we had to rerun a valuation, we would delete based on position and reinvoke as well. So we were doing custom things in the valuation on the before to try to streamline that process. That works great for your, your valuations outside of credit. Credit, if you want to rerun a valuation, you have to use a different time because the forward exposure tables doesn't do an upsert. It just, there's no accountability for rerunning credit on the same day. It doesn't update the forward credit properly. So we've learned that we have to delete by credit valuation number and rerun that time if we want to get a clean credit run. But for the most part, I mean, this is what we're here for, to hear other people, all of our stories. And
just want to add to that on the valuation piece. We have, which I'm sure so have here is a class event that allowed you to change like the weighting and how it would do those positions onto the grid row. I will tell you, we've used that back since before 145. When we were, again, this problem I was just referring to earlier, where we were having valuations, our valuation time had creeped up to almost 4 hours. And we were trying to figure out what we can do to get it down. And one of the things we eventually did, which we hadn't done since we had upgraded from 145.4.2 to 5.4, which we're on now, we actually pulled that class event out, stopped it entirely, let the core code run again. And so kudos to Ion, because apparently whatever they did is much better than what it was before, because the grouping of the core code ended up cutting that 4 hours down to 2, and we've since got it down to an hour. So we don't use that class event anymore. The core code is actually functioning much better than it used to. So.
Tracy from Oxy. So we were seeing a lot of that performance issues for some of our settlement runs, and we also had issues with a lot of our gas tiered price deals where it wouldn't revalue them properly if volumes or pricing structure was changed. So I'm definitely not technical, so I can't go into details to that, but so I don't know if it's a class event, but we were able to do some customizations to split the positions. So as it hit the grid, it would be 1 position per row, which blew the grid out really quickly, but the performance and the runtime was much faster, which helped with the performance as well as actually valuing our tier trades properly. So that helps a lot. But again, we're on 9868. We're looking to upgrade, so we'll reevaluate that when we go, but it's helped us a lot today.
We're about out of time, so thanks everybody, appreciate it.
Great. Yeah, thanks to Value Creed as well for their part of the session. All right, so it's 2:30. We are going to take another 15